Now, this is an extremely unusual palm reading because most people, when they approach me for a palm reading, they want to know about their future. They want to know if they'll be famous, wealthy, how's their health, will they have children, is my partner cheating on me? They're thinking ahead. However, this palm reading, this person wants to know about their past, and I find this very intriguing. And I know next to nothing about this individual other than they are male, they're quite young, and they want to know about their past. Otherwise, I know nothing except for what the palms are telling me. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at, in particular, both the left and the right hands, what the palms are showing me internally and externally. And I'm going to be looking at the fate line and the lifeline because I'll be timing events. Now, famously, Tyro, the great palmist in the 19th century, said that to look at a person's past, we look at their left hand and the future holds the right. There is some truth to that, but in reality, both the left and the right hand show us these answers internally and externally, how they affect us emotionally, psychologically, and how they affect us physically, practically. By the way, you can check out my palm reading for the Great Palmist Cairo. I will drop a description or maybe a card somewhere about this moment here. Quite fitting, really, that I'm reading this person's palm, looking specifically at their past, because younger people, their future is not set in stone, at least for most. And the path ahead will change quite significantly because they're in a stage of development, because the circumstances, the present circumstances, are in a state of continual change, much more so than people who are sort of 35 and older. So it's very difficult, really, to look at a person's future. And I never like looking too far ahead, especially when looking at a young person's palm. I don't mind talking about character traits, personality traits, possible inherited or otherwise health traits, or potential skills and things like that. That's fine. But in terms of future and divination, it's a bit of a sketchy subject. So it really makes a lot of sense, actually, to look at this person's past, especially that they're young. When I say young, and I don't actually know how old they are, but I'm going to say no older than 22. I could be completely wrong about that. I've been wrong about that in the past. Before I get into any of the past stuff, I'm just going to look at this person's character in terms of what the hand shape, the fingers and the hand shape are telling me. And instantly I can see there is an analytical person here and a very dynamic person here. The combination is very mixed hand. The finger leanings are interesting because Apollo leans towards Saturn, as does Jupiter. Jupiter and Saturn are both relying on this person's capabilities, talents, their sense of self-worth, their duty, their path in life, and how they reveal themselves in society, how they can contribute. These two aspects of themselves rely on their capabilities and their talents. The Mercury finger is strong, it's long, and it acts as a rudder, so it's on its own in this respect. And I can see that Apollo and Saturn are kind of leaning away from each other, but then they reluctantly begin to rely on each other at the tip here. And this shows, again, that reluctance in terms of working with others. There's a need here. There's a reliance, a dependency to work with others. However, there's also a feeling here that this person would work exceptionally well alone rather than part of a team. And if they are working as part of a team, well, they need to be part of a small team that can communicate very well. This finger of communication and expression is, as I say, very long, and it's got a great thickness to it as well, and that's really important. This person's voice is quite strong, and I think as a personality, they're probably quite strong as well. They certainly know how to get their message across. They know how to be heard. I think there is still room for improvement here, and I say that because Jupiter isn't quite as long as I want it to be. Jupiter is ever so slightly shorter on the left hand. Well, actually, no, they're pretty evenly matched. There's no real sort of reduction in confidence, it seems. However, both I'd like to see Apollo and Jupiter being a little bit longer. And what this shows is essentially the Saturn finger is at its longest. And being that all fingers in all turn in towards Saturn, this makes this person a Saturnian. And what that means is the Saturn qualities about this person are most upright. Quite literally, they uphold the traits about this person are more enhanced when it comes to their duty, their sense of contributing towards society, their traditional values, their sense of right and wrong. There we go. I'm touching on it now. Their conscience, their moral compass is quite strong. Now I'm getting into the chirology, the lines on the palms, and you can see that the heart line here rises up in between both Saturn and Jupiter. And this is always someone with a good, strong moral compass. This is someone who feels quite strongly in general about cause. When they are wronged, they certainly won't sit back and take it. I'm looking at this other image here because I want to look at the thumbs and get a sense as to the curvature of the thumbs. Here we go. This makes more sense now. And I've got a fairly good frame of reference. I'm not going to pay too much attention to them being slightly turned in like this, which would kind of represent this person's choices, their decisions, their will is being in some way impeded, and others are making decisions for them, which is quite possible because these thumb leanings, so to speak, might not be accurately reflecting their will and their logic. And what initially I was looking for when I'm looking at the thumb here is to gain a sense of, this charitable person, someone who really has needs to get behind a cause. And I don't really see all that. I was wondering if I had a person here who was very willing to fight someone else's fight. And that's not to say that this person wouldn't or can't. But I was just trying to find out a bit more about this person's Saturnian qualities. I think they are quite likely depressive and melancholic at times. And this is because a person with a long Saturn finger, this sort of depressive, isolated, they at times self-isolate, withdraw. It is because, well, these are what the long Saturn finger represents. And also, and I had a kind of a moment there in my mind, that's what this also represents as well, this reluctancy, this hesitance of both the Apollo and the Saturn finger to lean. They hesitantly lean towards each other. There's a gap here, and then they're kind of pulling towards each other. Really, this person wants a bit of alone time. They want a bit of space, which is what the Mercury finger also shows us as well, the distance between Mercury and Apollo as well. This is what this also shows us. What this also shows us, Apollo leaning in fairly sharply towards Saturn as well. This person is thinking about the future, although they're obviously concerned about their past and they want to know more about their past, which I find is an intriguing question in itself. They are concerned about their future. They're not really sure about where they're going and how and why and who and when. All of these questions are kind of swirling around a little bit in their minds, and that's what this always represents. It shows a consideration for the future. And it also shows a consideration for others as well. Now, partly where I conclude on this person being in some ways depressive is because of the headline here. It's a wonderful headline in that the art is exceptionally creative at the same time as having a very sort of grounded, logical approach. There's a strong ability here and I see a memory loop as well. Wonderful. A strong ability here for certainly dream recall. Long-term memory is exceptional. And they're able to draw on these experiences. Well, that's actually interesting in itself, isn't it? This person wants to know about their past, yet they have a good long-term memory. There must have been something that's occurred here. And I'm reading quite literally in between the lines, in between what they've asked me and their question. And I suppose that's all reading, isn't it? But at least I'm being honest about it. The headline drooping so low into Luna and being so long as well, reaching right down underneath Mercury, with the Mercury finger itself being so long, shows actually this person is very intelligent, and sometimes to their own detriment. This is partly why they are so melancholic, why they at times are introverted, isolate themselves, and are prone to depression. And this is because quite often people who are so hyper aware and able to absorb information can't help but feel overburdened by the distinct um, reality of the world around them. Now, a creative headline such as this, with a fate line that rises also from the lower depths of Luna, with such a well-developed bank of, you know, the middle of Luna here is just remarkable. And also note that Apollo here is fairly spatulate, is at least spatulate, somewhat squarish, but it's certainly well developed here as well. And all these signs are showing here this is someone who has a very creative inclination and will likely work towards the arts or something creative in some way, shape, or form. But remember, I'm going off track here because I'm going to talk about their past. Now I'm going to get into their past here, and I'm going to look at the left hand first of all. And this is not because I really go by that kind of theory that the left hand shows us the past. They both show the past in different ways. I want to see how this person has been affected internally by their past events. And I'm looking at the left and right, and I see actually kind of a mirroring effect here, which is interesting. And I can see the family ring as well. And there's a lot of issues here. So, issues, I don't really like that word, very vague and nondescript. I see two family rings here. Now, what this shows us is this one is the hereditary family, the biological family influences. And it's tasseled. There's a lot of strain and stress and struggle, strife, and you can see actually two large islands on the family ring. Islands on the family ring typically represent children. And that doesn't mean to say this person has two children. However, it looks like they have the potential for two children in life. At least that's what the hand is saying right now. I might be getting that wrong. The second family ring here is showing us this other domestic, close to home, paternal, maternal influences here. Guardians of a sort, or at least influences that are in some way guiding. These are more positive influences, and you can see these influences here as they travel across the Venus mount, affecting the lifeline in later life. And it could be that these lines really change and form and create a very different meaning, even just a few years' time. So I don't really want to draw too much meaning on this, but what I can see is great anger here coming from inner Mars, Mars being the god of war and aggression, drive and determination, motivation, when we need to really provide physical energy and impact our environment. This is the right hand, remember, this is practical material, what's physical. Then we call upon inner Mars here, and anger is the great motivator. And this is seen coming from family influence. It's closely tied, which is why Mars is so close to Venus, Venus being the place of love and the familiar, family, home, relationships. Mars is close to it because we fight for those who we love. Venus is said to be the goddess of love and battles, and this is why these two are so close together. Now I see this Mars line, and as it crosses the lifeline, it touches this ambition line. So it's directly linked to this ambition. This ambition line is saying, I need to pull myself out of this situation and rise up onto the Jupiter mount, this place of ambition in itself, change. And this is, notice how this ambition line curves in towards the ulnar side of the hand, and it's really showing how this person has changed within. The physical impact to their life has enabled this internal change. And to corroborate this, we're looking on the left hand, and we can see the same thing. This person has been affected mentally and physically by the same event. But the big question is when. We're looking at the past, and we're looking at dating and timing events. So that's an interesting question. And we see this Mars line as it crosses the lifeline. It touches the lifeline at about the age of 22, and where the ambition line begins to rise, he looks to me at about the age of 25. I don't know how old this person is. This may well yet be an incident that's going to occur for this person. We see the same thing on the right hand as well. It's positive because although this struggle, this fight, so to speak, coming from inner Mars to influence this great change, to pull this person out of their situation, there's conflict here. But sometimes conflict is needed. Sometimes we need to burn vegetation for new growth. And that is essentially what's happening here. The triangle is always a fortunate sign. And notice how the line here points towards, we're moving towards expression, talents. This is something that this person wants to do for themselves. This is a drive and a step in the right direction for this person. And it's through this that um, they've worked hard on themselves and on the situation that they're in, and it's enabled them. That's what we're seeing here. We're seeing expression, freedom through their uh, pursuing of their own talents, their own capabilities. And it's not without a fight, though. That's what I'm seeing here. This is not an easy scenario. It's not an easy situation, and they're pulling themselves out of it, and they're bettering their own lives. Now, if we look at the fate line at the age of 25 to corroborate with what we're seeing on the lifeline, this I suppose is where it gets interesting. I'm trying to be precise here. The image is not extremely clear, but this is about the age of 25 on the fate line. And notice how the fate line it turns its course, it changes course. This person may not well have been employment. This is often referred to as a career line as well. And I don't think this is really resembling or representing career so much as it is this person's path, their purpose, and their journey, which is why it's more appropriately named the fate line. And you can notice at this age, it turns a slight course and it becomes a little bit more faint. And this shows really at this time in their life, things are more uncertain, things are difficult, and not quite as rewarding because this person essentially temporarily doesn't have a stronger purpose because they're in a sense carving their own purpose at this time. And what we see when we look at the right hand at the same time at 25 on the fate line here is, if you look very closely, you can see an influence here coming from the headline. This is a clear decision in a change in this person's path in life. They've quite literally derailed their own purpose, and not without difficulty, not without strain and unhappiness. I would have thought this was a very difficult time, and I think they had to probably, or if this is indeed in the future, I think they will have to. They'll fall on some sort of hard time. They're not going to have any money at this time, but I believe it is the right thing to do or to have done. Now, I think I'm going to go a little bit further back in time, and that is because look at the fate line. Notice how it stops in between the headline and the heart line. We don't see any further after this, and this again is because this person's future is not yet determined. There is no set path for this person because they are taking control of their own fate, or at least they do not have destiny as such. They are much more in control of their own destiny than many other palms I've read. And also, just being quite young, I think that's just a trait in itself. So if I go back in time a little bit here, now I can see at the age of 14, we have here a rising line here. It is an effort that rises towards Saturn and Apollo, in between the both of these two areas, and this really shows achievements in improving their own creative worth, their talents, and the sense of academic success here, a push and a strive towards um, language, writing, music, perhaps, or something creative, potentially involving maths in some way. No, perhaps not maths. It's something that's creative, that's certainly going to help them and aid them in their career. It's likely writing or music, speech writing or music. As an overall template, what I see here is great potential. The person is highly open-minded, highly intelligent, very creative, and probably quite artistic as well in terms of temperament and personality. They're very loyal. They may well have some anger management problems, and I say this because of the thumb. There's a good degree of ideas, and they're kind of bottled up here, and they're sort of funneled by somewhat explosive personality at times. But on the flip side, they have such a good degree of communicative abilities. Their their potential for ironing out and understanding, self-understanding is great. So I don't foresee any long-term issues here in terms of temperament. The nails certainly reflect a very sort of self-critical, a very critical nature, short temper. Again, this is, in part due to this anger management. Um, there's an impatience. There's a very um, quickness to this person reacting emotionally. However, there's also, on the flip side of this impatience, this disconnect between their thoughts and their environment. There is also a very non-conventional approach to how they think about creative endeavors. So there's a real advantage here, whilst they might be impatient and brash at times, and probably, you know, drive too fast if they do drive at all. They might overtake unwisely. At the same time, they are quite a radical thinker, and they certainly almost go out of their way to try and think very differently from others. This disconnect between the head and the lifeline is known as the mark of the tiger in Tibetan palmistry. And as such, it's likely this person has pretty much always moved quite quickly all throughout their life. They've been in a rush to get things done from day one. So I have a feeling that they have always been quite impatient with their own abilities, their own capabilities, and their own sense of achievement. This person, I know you're watching, I want you to I shouldn't say calm down. Why? No one should ever say calm down. I want you to slow down because there's plenty of time ahead, and I want you to know that you are in complete control of the road ahead. You have literally the fate of your own destiny in your hands. In palmistry, this is what we would call an empty hand. I've been really devouring this palm for information, and a few lines really shows, in some respect, someone who's sort of cool, calm, and collected, the silent type, silent but strong type. And in many respects, I do think that does accurately describe this person. But then there's also this very sort of mixed personality. There's a very strong feeling, an undercurrent underneath all of this. There's a very powerful ability to feel here. And I think that if this was, as long as this is expressed regularly and in a way that's healthy through creative endeavors and just verbally, I think this will help with it in a big part of this anger management problem that's, actually not huge, but certainly has been a problem in the past. Now, I noticed on that note, going back even further, the headline crashes into the lifeline at quite an early age. And actually, when you look at it closely, and again, this is not the clearest of images, you can see that it's the headline emerging from the lifeline itself. This is the direction. So it's not actually the headline crashing into the lifeline at all. This is this person claiming independence at an extremely young age. This person is a highly independent individual. They will do things their own. They will do things their own way. They'll do it at their own speed. And they will likely, I'm getting into the fingerprint patterns here to see what we can say about this person's character further, and this is a highly dependable, trustworthy, practical person who's very able to, weigh things up and judge in the moment. They're very mixed. And as I said at the beginning of this reading, they're very practical and logical, while at the same time as having a very good ability to say, well, what if? There's a strong creativity here, and there's a strong loyalty as well. Now, I find it fascinating that there is a fate line that wraps around the base of the thumb, and this may well be the most revelatory piece of information I'm about to uncover so far in this palm reading, because the fate line that comes from this far in and around the ball, the base of the thumb, the ball here, Venus, it shows someone's fate who was decided for them almost at birth, someone who was destined to work alongside the family in the family business. Or perhaps the parents had an idea as to what their child was going to do in the first place. However, and this is the big one, notice how it completely cuts off and stops altogether. And the fate line begins anew, almost as though this person has been completely cut off and separated from their family, which would explain the secondary family ring. The independence claimed at a dramatically, radically early age here would suggest and corroborate with this a completely disconnected and beginning anew of a fate line here. And everything I've seen in this palm, both these palms so far, leads me to believe that although this person might not know a great deal about their past right now, all of the answers lie ahead of them, in part because they have their own fate in their hands. I highly recommend this person keeps a diary, and a dream diary. I'd like this person to record and write the dreams they have each morning when they wake up. This is difficult at first. It doesn't actually work at first. It might seem a bit silly, but every time you wake up, the closing of the gap where you realize, oh, I've forgotten to write in that again. Oh, I forgot my dream, will narrow to a point where you begin to remember, to write it down and remember what that dream was. And eventually, this will help with self-understanding, greater self-understanding, greater self-awareness, lead towards finding solutions in potential anger management problems, but also ultimately lead towards the answers that you seek in terms of your past. What I do find particularly interesting about this palm is the way this loyalty line almost cuts the Venus mount in two and enlarges the Mars mount. This person's Mars, their warrior within, is strong, and this can be an incredible, positive, productive attribute, trait. However, it can also be extremely destructive and counterproductive, depending on how this is utilized. This person has great potential to harm others at the same time as great potential to fight for others. I want this person to really work on utilizing this great drive and determination they have within for greater good. And actually, a military career, in some respects, might be not a bad shout. This person would make a superb military tactician as well. But I just cannot help but feel that a creative endeavor is really what would help this person grow and develop. The fate line coming from Luna like this is often a person who seeks a career with an audience. However, it's also seen in the palms of people who help others, and this person having a strong moral compass. I would like also potentially to see this person go down the path of potentially even the military. I think this would be a really good fit for this person. I think they would get a great sense of job satisfaction from this and really utilize their inner warrior in a productive and positive way. Thanks for watching, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are. Perhaps you have some of the signs in this palm. Perhaps you've picked up on something that I haven't. Um, so I'm really intrigued to know your thoughts. Please subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.